It was a good week one for KU football, not just because of what they did, but because what happened around the country and in the Big 12.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. And on today's bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, a little late Sunday night action here, we're talking a little KU football thoughts from not just their perspective, but things that touch on them from around the country that happened in week one, from Jeff Grimes with his Wisconsin debut to what Missouri looked like to what happened around the rest of the Big 12. Let's start right there with the Jeff Grimes stuff, because I think this is very interesting to see. It is a small sample. It is just one game. There is a chance Wisconsin, again, it ends up being one game, and Wisconsin ends up, having a really good season, or they end up being a good offense. Like, sometimes it takes time with new coordinators, yada, 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 of reasons you could go on that, it is just one game. But in theory, you're playing your first game of the season. You're playing one of the weaker opponents you're going to be playing. You would hope that your offense looks pretty darn good and impressive. And it was kind of a flop for the Jeff Grimes era at Wisconsin. They put up just 17 points against Miami of Ohio. Now, the Red Hawks, I don't know how much people, have been studying their MACtion, but Miami of Ohio has been a really good team. They won 20 games over the last 2 years combined. They have 4 straight bowl trips. So, it's a good team. But still, again, if you're comparing what Miami of Ohio is to who else is going to be on that Wisconsin schedule, it's a bottom half game. It's maybe a bottom third game, or a bottom, fourth. That's not a word. Bottom quarter game for Wisconsin, on the schedule that they have, right? And so you look at Wisconsin last year, they were not a very good offense, just 22.6 points per game, 5.3 yards per play, but they were even worse in the Miami of Ohio game, 4.7 yards per play. The points was obviously below the 22.6. They had just a 4% explosive play rate, which would rank in the bottom 10% of college football. They were poor in the red zone as well. And I think the explosive play rate is the one that I really want to touch on here and harp on. Super interesting to me, because we saw KU's explosive plays really drop under Jeff Grimes, especially over the first half of the season before the back half of the year for KU. Wisconsin had just 3 explosive plays. They ran 82 plays in the game against Miami of Ohio. So again, it could be personnel, it could be yada, yada, yada. But, and there was even a comment during the game from the broadcaster that was like, the last 3 stops he's been to, offenses have gotten better everywhere he's been. And he's like, well, I don't know if that's true, but I don't know. I don't say all this to just I guess, I know this is coming across as negative, because again, I can keep going in stats, right? Wisconsin only had 353 yards of offense. They lost EPA per play on early downs. They didn't exploit much of the middle of the field or at the intermediate level. Hey, that sounds just like Kansas and where they were a season ago. 10 plus yards down the field and over the middle third, they attempted a total of 2 passes. They went 1 for 2. In the intermediate range of 10 to 20 yards, they went 0 for 3. You compare that to what KU did last week against Fresno State. They were 4 for 4 with a touchdown in both areas. So, again, I'm sure Jeff Grimes is a good dude. I think with the right and specific personnel for exactly what he tries to do as an offense, he can be a solid OC. I think he's a good O-line coach. But the reason I bring this up isn't to, poop on Jeff Grimes. I don't know. Maybe it is a little. No. It's more so to back up the idea to say, hey, look, see what happens here with Wisconsin? This is further proof that what happened last year was, it's not 100% fault. There were other things that were going on with Jalen Daniels and other things around the team and the program that wasn't just Jeff Grimes. But the more we get removed from it, the more that you see a situation like what happened in the first game of the year for Wisconsin with Jeff Grimes, and you see what KU has looked like with Jim Zebrowski and Matt Lubick as the co-offensive coordinators, and Zebrowski calling plays for the KU offense. And it's hard not to continue to to turn that in a way that should make you feel optimistic for where this current KU football team is and where the program is going to be going forward with that as your coaching, with that as your offensive coordinator. It's hard for me not to, be like, okay, because as the early part of the season, Kansas coming off a 5-7 season, you're 2-0, and it's been a fun start for KU, but there's obviously still questions of, okay, but how much of is it for real, right? You're going to be playing a tougher part of your schedule the final 10 games. How much of what you've seen in the first 2 games is for real? And all of this basically is a way for me to say, this is evidence as to why it wasn't working last year, at least a big part of why, and now you have removed yourself from that, and here's some of those reasons why, and now Kansas is in a better place. So it does make me feel better about the rest of the season for KU. All right, let's continue on here. Missouri looked pretty good. What happened around the rest of the Big 12? Do you feel better or worse about the KU schedule through the first week of the season? We'll get to all that next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Rougiette Ready. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, in just 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head over to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get 15% off today. That's rougiette.com, RUGIET.com, RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Thanks for joining us on this bonus episode of Locked on Jayhawks. We'll be back for our full episode on Monday, talking our 3 biggest takeaways from the KU Wagner game, goats of the game, and even more of an early look ahead on Missouri, which we're going to talk about a little bit right here on the show. They looked pretty good. It was against just Central Arkansas. So, it's tough to say, okay, you should be overmatching them, and especially with the way Missouri has brought in talent via the portal and recruiting over, the Eli Drinkwitz era. Like, you're going to outmatch those teams. But, 61-6. And again, you can say it is just Central Arkansas, and it is. And that doesn't, not everything that happened in that game is applicable for the Kansas game or the rest of that schedule. At the same point in time, if you're a team, you would rather have happen what Missouri did to Central Arkansas than what K-State had happen against North Dakota, right? Those wins are a little bit different in how you might be feeling about those teams coming afterwards, right? So Missouri had good pass block, passing, run defense, tackling, and coverage grades on Pro Football Focus in that first game. They did not show, a great number in run blocking and pass rush grades on Pro Football Focus. Again, small 1-game sample size against an FCS team. How much can you take away? I don't know, but maybe we take that into the scouting report as we get ready for KU Missouri this week. Overall, Missouri doubled up Central Arkansas and some in yards. They had a 97% game, 97th percentile, I should say, game in EPA per play, 98th percentile game in success rate. They did it running the ball. They did it throwing the ball. Obviously performed well defensively. You hold them to 6 points. Didn't get a ton of negative plays, maybe, as you would think, especially against the run. But again, overall held them to 6 points. I think the big headline was the quarterback for Missouri. It was Sam Horn, the original starter, got hurt. It was like the first play of the game, first drive of the game. And so they go to Bo Pribula, who was the transfer from Penn State, who made headlines by transferring during the college football playoff. He came into Missouri as a very talented player, dual threat quarterback, and was kind of expected to win the job with how big of a headline addition that was. Ends up Horn wins the job, but then he gets injured, and now Pribula comes in and looked really good. 23 of 28, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, really fast as well. 10 carries, 65 yards, 2 scores, and he had a total QBR of 82.4. So all things good there for Missouri, but it'll be interesting how KU defends the dual threat quarterback, because under Brian Borland, the defense has struggled against dual threat quarterbacks and allowing quarterbacks to run the football. I'll be very interested to see how the DK McDonald does in a similar situation. But I think overall, I didn't really see anything from Missouri that makes me feel better about the game for KU, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that like I feel significantly worse either given the opponent, right? So no negatives for the Tigers in week 1, really, outside of the quarterback injury, which again, might not matter if Pribula kind of keeps playing like that, but should be a fun one in Columbia. I don't know, a stressful one in Columbia coming up this Saturday. We'll be breaking it down plenty this week on Locked On Jayhawks. How the rest of the Big 12 looks, specifically some of the teams KU plays on the schedule, we'll get to that next. And today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by FanDuel, as FanDuel Sportsbook has all your action for week 2, right? I mean, gosh, I keep thinking, third game of the season for KU, but it's week 2. Regardless, they have it over there. You can even get, if you what you saw in week 1 was, adjusted how you feel about certain teams to win the title. Like, if you're like, hey, I really liked what I saw from LSU against Clemson, going down and winning the battle of Tigers in Death Valley. They're 12-1 odds right now. You really like what Oregon did against a really good Montana State FCS team. They're 12-1 too. If you're like, hey, I think that Heisman is wide open this year. Maybe I like John Mateer at Oklahoma. He's 16-1 for OU. You can get all those going on over at FanDuel. Just visit the FanDuel app, start planning your future bets or your current week 2 bets right now. And FanDuel, play your game, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. And what happened in the Big 12? Well, before I did want to at least make mention of this at some point in the show. So I will mention, like, Fresno State was really good. They were, I think, 1.5 point dogs to, I forget if it was Georgia State or Georgia Southern, Georgia S. And they won like 42-14. Looked really, really good. So that makes you feel even better about how much Kansas controlled that game. Again, it was 31-7, and it could have been even better than that for Kansas if they would have, kept their foot on the gas pedal really in the second half from kind of a play calling perspective. And I think it was the smart thing to do, to be clear, but just saying, like, realistically, they could have even won by more than that. Let's start with this. K-State. Oh boy. It was, if Iowa State, I think, would have struggled in their game back, I think you would have pointed to both and been like, yeah, it's tough to come back from Ireland. You play a conference game. You got, short rest to get back. You don't have a bye week like the teams do in the NFL when they're coming back over from England. And then all of a sudden you're playing an FCS team who's, instead of, you've been targeting your week 0 game against your conference opponent all offseason, they've been targeting you, and that would make it tough. But Iowa State just murdered the team they played. And then you have K-State, who barely beats North Dakota. And yes, the Dakota schools have been really good at football. North Dakota has not been, as good, losing record last year. Now, again, like, if they're in an easier conference and they're not having to play South Dakota State, North Dakota State, like they probably are a winning team, but still, that was a little alarming for Kansas State. So I think that makes you feel a little better about the KU game, but also at the same point in time, like, K-State could be going into that game 0 and I don't know what game that is of the season, 0-8, 0-7, whatever it is. And I would still in the back of my head be like, man, they've won 16 straight. Like, I'm scared coming into this game in a different way. But who knows? Hopefully that ends this year. I saw what I wanted to see from my preseason Big 12 title pick, which was Utah. They looked the part against UCLA. That's going to be a really good game for Kansas. Home game, senior day for KU. That would be and Utah might be ranked pretty high when that does come down. So that'll be a good one, but I think Utah's a really good team. I thought Arizona looked really sharp overall. Maybe it just means Stanford's going to go 0-12 because Stanford lost to Hawaii and then Hawaii got housed by Arizona. But I thought that was impressive for Arizona. That's a team Kansas plays. And I've continued to kind of say, yeah, I know you're looking at them as being a 4-8 team last year. They might be a 6 or 7 win team this year. And then you're looking at that game differently on the road. UCF barely won against a Jacksonville State team that had a lot of leftovers that didn't come to West Virginia with Rich Rod. So I think that's a little alarming for UCF. I feel better about that game after the first week. And I've said this before, I should probably add this disclaimer. Teams, I think, improve the most from week 1 to week 2 of the season. You finally get something on tape. You finally have something else against another opponent. That week 2 game will be the real stress. So like UCF might have looked like that. I don't know who they play in week 2, but all of a sudden if UCF wins big, it's like, okay, maybe they just got a lot better. Or maybe Jacksonville State's pretty good. But off that first game alone, yeah, I do feel better about that one. Same with the Oklahoma State game. They kind of struggled with UT Martin. Now, we have seen in the Mike Gundy past where they've kind of struggled or not been super great in their first couple games of non-con, and then they turn it on in Big 12 play. So we'll see. But certainly after as bad as they were last year to not, go out and just kill UT Martin, probably not a great sign for the Cowboys. They couldn't really run it. Haas Haney, their starting quarterback, broke a foot in his bone. Now, based on the timeline, it sounds like he would be able to be back by the time that the KU game happens. So we'll kind of wait and see what happens there. I thought Cincinnati looked solid, even in a loss. I mean, 3-point loss to a Nebraska team that's probably going to win 7 or 8 games. You lose a close game. That was a true road environment. It was at Arrowhead, neutral stadium. I mean, that was like all Nebraska fans. And I mean, I just thought they were kind of impressive. It's going to be kind of about the run defense for Kansas if they want to beat Cincinnati later in the year. I'm not going to hold Colorado losing to Georgia Tech against them. I just think Georgia Tech's a pretty good team, and Colorado actually played them tough, right? KU also doesn't play Colorado, so whatever. KU doesn't play Baylor. I still think highly of Baylor, even after losing to a talented Auburn team. And again, don't have to worry about them in the schedule. Arizona State, not in the KU schedule. They kind of had a game with Northern Arizona. I continue to believe that they're not going to be one of the teams that represents the Big 12 in the title game, but I do think they'll at least still be solid this year. They do have enough talent to, win 7 or 8 games, maybe 9. And then I would say with West Virginia, Texas Tech, BYU, all teams that just took care of business. I don't know that I learned like a bunch about, but I didn't learn any negative about, and that's a good thing for them. The only negative would be the Baron Morton injury, but sounds like that's going to be minor. So, I think overall, again, going through some of the teams, like maybe you feel a little bit better about the UCF game and the Oklahoma State game and the K-State game after the week and stuff. Maybe you feel a little worse about the Utah game. You feel the same about Iowa State. Maybe you feel a little worse about Arizona. So, I don't know, maybe overall on aggregate, you feel a little bit better about the KU schedule this year. Not that anybody was saying it was like the biggest gauntlet in the world, but yeah. So we'll wait and see what happens in week 2. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Again, check out our full episode coming out on Labor Day Monday, the 3 biggest takeaways for KU against Wagner, and an early look ahead to Missouri. See you next time with Locked on Jayhawks.